So that's where you can find the footage at. The first GoPro that I shot didn't do anything because the battery died, but the second one did. Your first mission in this is to grab a section of this. If you're more comfortable using After Effects, I'm more comfortable using After Effects, you can definitely use After Effects. Premiere is the optimal place to do that. Yes, I know, I will locate the footage for you, don't worry. There we go. Nope, that's not the footage, you lied to me. Let me re-import my footage, because it just died. There it is. Okay, so here is the GoPro footage. Shrink that down. There we go. Awesome. Typically, GoPro footage before, they must have updated it. But typically, you'd have to open it up in a separate application and then edit inside there and then separate that or send that over to another program. They've since changed it, so now I can bring it right into Premiere. Okay, so if you're comfortable with Premiere, then I'm sure you'd already know Premiere and how to get a piece of footage in there. If you're comfortable with After Effects or want the, that was a simpler way to do it, but it's definitely my more comfortable way. 25 Pro. You just double click here, import your footage. It should bring it in with the correct settings. So 1280 by 720 at 2997. I forgot to show you that because that's a new box. Down here at the bottom, there's a create composition box. So it automatically will create a composition for you. You don't have to do that part, okay? So make sure that that is checked as well when you import. And then you'll have your piece of footage. Now, here's the big difference between After Effects and Premiere. If I hit play, it looks like it's playing pretty smoothly throughout the entire thing. If I delete my cache real quick. Yes. As I click and drag, you can see how pixelated this is. So After Effects, in order to play this video, even though it's already a video, needs to load each frame into the memory. Where Premiere, you can see I can scrub back and forth pretty quickly. And if I had 50 videos in here, it would still be pretty quickly. Okay? So that's one of the big advantages of using something like Premiere is that you get pretty much instant feedback like right away. When I hit play, I can see exactly what's happening. I don't have to wait for it to load into the memory or anything. So what we're looking for in this case is we're looking for a nice smooth transition. Now with the GoPro, we're not going to use that. Number one, because it's handheld. So if you watch here especially, you can see how the camera's kind of like going side to side, and I get this like very walky kind of feel from the GoPro. Okay, especially right there as I'm trying to turn because it's very clunky trying to move around. So typically when you're doing something like this, if you want your work to look professional, you're going to use something that has wheels or tracks or something else to help guide it, because as a person it's very difficult to walk nice and smooth. And that was one of my main reasons for showing that. The other thing that I want to point out too is that with a GoPro, we talked about last time how the lenses can be distorting. The GoPro totally distorts. I turned it off a little bit here, but it totally distorts the sides of it. So you can see this wall, that should be straight. Obviously that's not straight. That would be an issue when we track stuff, because what happens is it looks for stuff in one frame and then sees where it is in other frames. So when I go a little bit further ahead, okay, so we look at this lamp and this line that are totally crooked. As I back up, the lamp is now straight. So that would confuse the tracker, and it would think that it's actually like a moving piece, but it's like, I don't know what that is. It would kind of freak out. Okay, so we can definitely use GoPro footage. We could use this footage for something, but we would have to undistort it and play with it. All right. So I'm not going to use this footage. I'm just going to delete that. And then I'm just going to import my other footages, those three. Okay. So one of them is a test of me hitting the button, which is this one. So that's nothing. We would not use that. So just delete that one. And then the other one is this. There. And we'll see that this camera move, after I get past that chair, is actually pretty smooth. Now, we don't want to take the entire thing into Nuke because that would take like forever to track this entire thing. If this is 30 frames a second and that's 10 seconds, that's 300 frames that we have to track. Not a huge deal, but the more time we spend doing that, obviously, the less time we have to play with the other features of it. Let's go to this one. Again, kind of a weird spot right at the beginning. I think this one is probably like a really good shot to use. We'll use that one. All right. So in Premiere, I'm going to go to a new sequence. It's going to say what kind of footage do you have. I have a 720 at 30 frames. So I hit OK. I drop my footage into here. And then using some sort of alt middle scroll wheel, I'm able to zoom, or I can just use this. There we go. And then what I want to do is just scoot that over, scoot this down. I want to isolate just the section I need. I don't need the entire thing. Like, there's no point in me bringing that into Nuke because, again, it's just going to complicate things. So I want to go to where I have the start of this, which is right about here. And I'm going to use my scissor, or razor, so I hit C and I can cut it. And then I'm going to scrub along until I get to the end of this. Let's say right about here. Okay. So you can find just a good spot in the video where you're like, hey, here's a good section to use. Something over 6 or 7 seconds, so something over 7 seconds. But definitely not the entire clip. So I'm going to grab more of this. Typically, you want to grab more than you would need if you can, because it just gives you a little bit more extra data to pull from. If you shoot a piece of footage like this, and the director or editor or whoever comes back to you and says, well, we need another second on here, it's a big hassle to go through and redo the track and re-add everything in there. It's much easier just to do it this way. Sweet. So there's our footage. Now this gives us video and audio from Premiere. We don't need video and audio in Nuke, we only need the video. So I'm going to go to Export, and I'm going to say Export Media. Okay, so this part is very similar to like After Effects. We have to set up what we want this to be. So by default, I think it's like AVI, just like After Effects. We want this to be a TIFF sequence. I need a sequence of images to bring into Nuke. It can bring in a video, but the video is typically going to play back pretty chunky. You want something that's going to play back pretty quick. So I'm going to set this to be a TIFF. Everything else should be good there. My output name, I'm going to call this. I need to make my folders. I did not make my folders yet. P drive there, 60. Sarcona. And what we're doing is called 2DTracking. And I need a sequences folder. All right, so that's where I'm going to put my stuff. So P drive, there, sequences. And I'm going to call this classroom footage dot pound dot TIF. Now what the pound is going to do is tell Premiere to render out each one of these frames with a different number. So frame 1 will be 1, frame 2 will be 2. Okay. So there's that. There's no audio, which is what we want. Yep, everything else should be good. So then I can just say export. So now if I go into that sequence folder, oh, it's putting the pound signs. Stupid. After Effects does not put the pound signs. Premiere apparently does put the pound signs. So that's no big deal either. I'm just going to wipe those away and then just do that again without the pound signs. And then export. Yep, and then it's automatically going to label them 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. If you're in After Effects, you need to specify the pound signs, otherwise it doesn't know how to do that. So I'll show, now that Premiere is done, in After Effects I'll show how we can go into here and do the same thing. So I'm going to delete all this, import the classroom footage. Sure. So because I grabbed all three, it put them all into the same composition. They all have the same settings, so that shouldn't be a big deal. So I'm going to look at one of these first. So I'll click the top one. And again, there's that slow playback. Don't like that. Let's go to the next one. That's good there. And the third one, which I don't even think I looked at inside of Premiere. All right, so that one looks pretty good there too. So I'm going to go to, let's say, 3 seconds here, and I'm going to use Alt left bracket. Oops, make sure I click this layer. Alt left bracket to cut the layer there. Scoot this back to the beginning. Delete these other two because I don't need those. Go to where I want this to end. Let's say there. And I will Alt right bracket that side. And then I need to trim my workspace. So you can see that the process of this is a little bit different in After Effects, even though they're the same company. Then I would go to File Export, Add to Render Queue, click on the word lossless, and from here, the process is the same. TIFF sequence, hit OK, go to Output 2, and there. Class footage. And here's where After Effects has the pound signs. So I'm going to put a dot and then put these pound signs in brackets. Don't save it into a subfolder. And then render. And then After Effects is going to do the same thing. We should get another sequence inside of our folder. No, I called it class footage. I called it the same exact thing, except one has a dot and one doesn't. So it didn't overwrite them because this one doesn't have a dot and the other one does have a dot and one has more dots. So I'm just going to cut these, put those into a new folder. One. And then make another new folder, class footage 2. There we go. Okay. Now, if this was something that was part of a bigger movie, typically this whole piece, like someone would go into editing, they would edit out all the shots, they would get approvals and that kind of thing. And then once they were satisfied with it, they would say, okay, now in this shot, we want this thing to happen. They would cut out that exact shot from there, give it to the nuke person, and they would go through and do all the work. Okay. So typically there's a whole lot of editing that goes into that. We just skip that part. So I'm just going to don't save my After Effects stuff. Yeah, we don't need to save that. We could save it, and that way the audio would match up, but I don't think the audio is really going to be necessary in this case. Close that, close that. Okay, remember, always open up Nuke X, not just regular Nuke, because Nuke X has extra features. All right, so last time we brought in an image. You remember the hotkey we used to bring in an image? R, right? So it's the same thing. We're still reading something in, so we go down here and hit R. There it goes. Where am I at? I need to go to the D drive, to the P drive. There's 60 2D tracking sequences. And I need to bring in one of my sequences. It doesn't matter which one I grab in this case, I'm just going to grab one. Notice the file size, that's a gig, right, for that sequence. So when we bring this in, we're having a gig of files. When we export this out, probably another gig, okay? So when I said you're going to need a lot of storage for this class, that's why. All right, so here's our footage. I'm going to hit 1 and hit play just to verify, yes, the footage is still there. Everything looks good. Cool. Before I progress any further, remember before we started doing some rotoscoping and adding some constants, and then we had to jump to this area and make sure that our overall dimensions of the project were set to the same settings, right? So I have to do that here. So inside this window, I'm going to hit S. There it goes. And I'm going to set my full-size format to what my project is. So in this case, I'm working at 1280 by 720. So I set that to 1280 by 720. I'm also working at 30 frames a second, so I type in 30 frames a second, okay? Now, if you've used Maya before, which most of you have, if you've used After Effects before, or Premiere, or anything like that, you know that keeping yourself organized is key to that. So if you work on this computer here, and Nuke read this file in, and it's looking in this location for that file, but then you go home, Nuke won't know where that is, right? So in this project settings, there's also a project directory. So I'm going to specify that I want my project directory to be in that same folder. So D drive, P drive, 2560, 2D tracking, there we go. Okay. Now what this will do is it will tell Nuke, this is where my main files are at, find everything else from within that area, okay? So now I have to go back to my footage, and it's already going all the way to tracking, so I'm going to delete everything here except for the sequence, whatever. There we go. So it still reads that footage, but now when I go home, all I have to do is change this, and any iterations I might have, any copies, any files I've imported, it'll automatically relink all of those because it knows where my main folder is. So if you've used Maya before, this is very similar to setting your project, okay? Cool. All right, so that should be all set there. Yep, everything's good. All right, so now we're going to play with tracking. So we're going to do what's called 2D tracking. Basically, I want to find a point, and I want Nuke to follow that point throughout the entire shot, okay? So let's say in this case, there we go, right here. So all the way in the back, you can see his head is pretty visible for the entire shot. So I'm going to track his head first. So I'm going to go under here, and I'm going to add a 2D tracker, which is just called tracker. Okay, and this is what we're going to get. Where did it go? That's that. Oh, I didn't add it yet, right? I'm going to add a track, and then this is what we're going to get. So this guy here has two parts to him. This square is what it's going to track. So it's going to look for that pattern of pixels. Okay, it doesn't know that it's a head, it doesn't know anything. All it knows is it's pixels. This area here is the area that it's going to look for those pixels from frame to frame. Okay, so on frame 0, which is where I'm at, I'm setting this up to say, hey, I want you to find this pattern of pixels every frame. Now because his hat is very similar color to that background, it may fail. Okay, we'll find out. If I have this thing too big, this track may find this pattern of pixels way over here. Okay, let's say I had the lamp here, or the fan. It's pretty close to the same size and shape. It may like jump over to the fan, okay? So we want to keep these things relatively small if we can. Now, if my footage moved a lot, I go from here over a few frames, I'm over on the other side, that's a huge movement, so I need to have that thing be big. Here, I move pretty slow, so I don't need to, okay? So I've added a tracker. I've added this track here. I have it positioned. I'm ready to go. I'm going to use this bar at the top to track forward, okay? But this is going to basically track to the end of the clip. So I hit play, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch this top left box right here. This is what it's tracking. So if I see that that box starts to wander away, I need to stop the track and then rein it back in, okay? So I'm going to hit track forward. And you can see that it's doing a pretty good job of staying locked in there. Even as we get closer, it's still pretty good, like right on top of it. Sweet. Okay, now we can check it out. We can verify that, it is good. If we decided that we didn't like how it tracked, all I'd have to do is go to a spot. Let's say 150 didn't work out. I could move this and then say, now track forward again. And what it would do is it would just pick up the track from there. So some things that can cause that to happen or reasons that it wouldn't work. Let's say that there was a flash of light. Over one frame, a flash of light came. That tracker is going to say, I don't know where that is, and it'll just like not track anymore. So that's an instance where we may need to adjust it. So this tracker is good. If I turn that off, it is no longer tracking that piece of footage. So if I were to hit, track backwards or anything, that shouldn't be tracking. Oh, I didn't click the other one off. There. Oh no, I just jumped back on. Probably because I had it selected. Yep, that's probably it. Yep, there we go. So I had it selected, that's why I did it. Okay. So once that's off, it won't track that one anymore. So what I can do is I can go through and I can track like several different items in the scene, and that way I'll have a tracking point for each one of them. So let's find some other stuff that we can track inside here. All right, so yeah. So you're in the scene a bit too, so let's add a track for that. Okay, and we always want to do this from the beginning, so I always go back to frame 0, and then I can just track that forward. And ideally what we're looking for is that that tracking point stays in the relatively same spot. So if we look, it's like, what, like an inch from the top of his hat? Here it's a little bit further down. But overall, it's pretty close to the same spot the entire time. Okay, so once we put our stuff on there, we can adjust it after. All right, so now we have 2 tracks. Now let's see what happens when a track stops. So I'm going to rewind it to the beginning. I'm going to add a track, and if something goes out of the scene, it will not track that at some point. So right here, the leaf that's poking out of the blinds, I may want to track that because maybe I want to remove it. I don't like the leaf poking out of the blinds. So I'm going to say track forward. There it goes, tracking, tracking, tracking. Boop, and it stops. Okay. So what happened is the leaf just went out of the frame. There's nothing there to track, so it just stops. So in this case, I would be fine with it. I'd say, okay, well that's, except for this frame here, that should be up a bit. And then the next frame after that, I'm using the arrow keys, should be up a bit. There we go. Okay, except for those, everything is pretty cool. Like that's exactly what that should look like. Okay, now if the leaf came back in the shot, like I spun around and we see the leaf again, I want to track it again, I could just go to where the leaf comes back in the shot and say track again, and it'll pick up that track from where the leaf left off. Okay, let's see. So we can track literally anything inside here. So we'll add another track. And oops, I'm adding keyframes here on that track. Turn 3 off, run with that. We're in 4. Track. There we go. All right, so I'm going to add another track here at the beginning. Track there. Now, if I was tracking a person, let's say I'm tracking one of their eyes, and that tracking, the bigger one, is a little bit too big, what could happen is that it could track this eye and then all of a sudden jump over to the other eye too. So you always have to watch this thing here and just make sure that it's tracking what you want to track. So we hit play and then there it goes. Okay, it's a little bit off, oh, and then it's gone. Okay, but I think that should be fine for, you know, what we're doing here. All right. Yep, that's good. Okay, so now we have these 4 tracks. So now we can do stuff with the track. So I'm going to go to track number 1. Oops. And I'm going to export transform match move. Okay. So what this is going to do is that when I say create, it creates a transform. So just like we had before where we would like move something into a spot, this is animated one of those moving transform nodes. So now if I were to add something in here, all right, what do you want on top of your head? All right, Pokemon. There we go. This is from the intro class. Look at that. Lots of fun in there. All right, so I'm gonna have another folder in here called footage or stills, and this is Pokemon JPEG. There we go. You can add whatever you want in yours, with obviously with tastefully add. So I'm gonna read in that still image. There's the Pokemon. And I'm gonna click it here, and then if I view this, you'll see there he is. And if I rewind it and hit play, there it is. Okay? So what we want to do is we have to actually now resize this so that it fits in that spot, and then obviously cut him out so that we don't have this weird thing. And obviously merge them together so we can see it. So first thing I'm going to do is merge. So I'm going to hit M for merge. What's going to be on top? Pokemon, right? Yep, so Pokemon will be on top, and then you will be on the bottom. There he is. And now I need to move it. So typically, I can move it either before this transform or after that transform. It doesn't matter which one I do. I prefer doing it before. So I hit T for transform. And I'm going to, whoops. I'm going to set this to 1, so I only get the last node I'm working with. It makes it so much easier. Put this here. Look at that. We can put it right on top of your face, actually. All right, now let's cut it out. So we're going to drop the transform down. I'm going to go to this point. And so we've learned several ways to cut things out, right? So what's one of them? Roto, right? That would probably be the easiest one because there's already white here and there's white there, so I really couldn't use the other one, which is a keyer, because then it wouldn't work. I could use a keyer to key out all this stuff and that stuff, and then use Roto to draw the eyes in. That's a possibility too, but it's Roto, so it's just super easy to just hit O and then just draw it. So I don't want to draw it here. I want to click on 1 so I can see it nice and big. And then I'm going to draw it this way. I think by the end of the year, I'm going to go crazy with every time I try to spin around inside of here, like I'm in Maya or Cinema or After Effects or Photoshop. All right, we'll just come back and edit that in a minute. All right, we're going to go here, there. It doesn't matter what to adjust that anyway. We'll go here. Go there. Okay. So now remember, in Photoshop, you would use the Alt key to break those handlebars. We will not use the Alt key. We will use the Control key. Because why would that be the same? Drag that. Oops, I did it again. They want to be different. You know, some of the software programs, they actually have like copyrights and patents on hotkeys. Yeah. Yeah, so that's like they literally can't allow anyone to use that because it's copywritten. That should be illegal, I think. All right, so I'm just going through, breaking the handlebars where I need to, keeping the handlebars together where I need to. Oops. Now, I could have also brought this image into Photoshop, which I'm more comfortable drawing with the pen tool in Photoshop, and then just saved it as a ping with transparency and brought that in here. That is, again, another option. Or save it as a TIFF with an alpha channel or something. Yeah. There we go. All right, so now it should be cut out. So if I hit A for alpha, it's the Playboy bunny. Right? Now we go back to our merge, and there it is. So why don't we see through that? What was that? Yep, we got to pre-multiply it. So right after this roto, we're going to add a pre-mult, and now it's cut out. And then we can go to our transform and just scoot this, let's say, oops, top of his head. And then because he should have that anyway, we need to have some sort of indicator as to why it's there. So I'll just go into roto real quick. And now this one I'm going to draw roto shape. So roto can be used as an alpha, or it can be used as just like drawing shapes inside here. There's even over here different shapes that you can use. So I'm going to view this so that I can see all of this together. So I'm going to merge these together. Doesn't matter if I do A or B here because they're going to be the same. Okay, so I just added a merge inside there. There's that shape. And then I'm going to open the roto and then just draw some shapes here. There we go. And one of these, no, that's good. Okay. Yeah, it looks square. All right, so now on this one, I need to make sure my output is not set to alpha, but it's set to RGBA. And what that means is that it's going to also write alpha channels with whatever color I specify. So I've drawn all these in white because there's default white. And then they'll output an RGBA out of here. So when I pre-multiply this, that's what I should get. So you are thinking about Pokemon. And then we will go back to this. We will move to our original transform, which is right here, and then we will scoot that over. All right, so now what should happen is that when I hit the play button, we should have this thing track to him so that it moves right with him. Okay, you can see there's a little bit of jitter in there. That might be the playback. That might be an actual jitter. We'll find out. Nope, that looks like it's actual jitter on the footage itself, or on the track itself. But it looks like it's only in that one spot, so that's pretty good. Okay. So what we can do to fix that is I can go back to this tracker. I can look at this little pattern here and see if there's anything that shouts out like, hey, there's something wrong. If this is moving pretty smooth and all of a sudden there's a big jut in there, like a big jump, then I would go to where it's jumped and I would just put it back to where it needs to be. Okay. Let's track 4. I don't want that. I want track 1. I could also go through and retrack it. So if I, let's say, moved it, let's say I went to the end of this footage, and I said, yep, that's a good spot to track, and then I said track backwards. What this will do is it'll go back and it'll retrack the footage backwards this time. And now sometimes you may get a different result because of that. Not always, but sometimes you will. Okay, so I'll close that, go here. Because this is a linked item, it automatically updated that track. Okay, so I don't have to re-export the transform. This transform, if we look at it, this little green arrow means that anytime I change this, it automatically updates that track. So now we'll watch that again. It's thinking about things. Yeah, there we go. Oh, it wants me to save before it crashes. Should probably do that. Should probably do that. So I added a dot node for this. I'm going to add another dot node here and then just drag this there. So this helps us stay nice and clean, organized. Click a dot there, drag this here. Good. Okay, so now this is nice and organized here. This merge here doesn't even need to be there. Okay, this merge can actually be right here, again, under its own little item. Okay, now this green line, there's going to be crossing over there because that's just how the green lines do it. You can actually hide them in the preferences, but for now we'll just leave it. So I duplicated my tracker that many times because I have 4 different tracks. And what I'm going to do is number 2 here, I'm going to disable this. I could even just delete number 1 just so it doesn't confuse me. Same thing here with these 2. On tracker 1, I can delete the other 3. On tracker 3, I can delete 1 and 2 and 4. And tracker 4, I can delete the other 3. Okay? Now, in a second, I'm going to show you why you may want several trackers. Now, on number 2, I want translate information. So, yes, enable, and yes, translate. On number 3, I want this enabled, and I want translate information, and same thing for number 4. There and there. All right. So now for each one of these, I'm going to do a transform match move. There is a difference here too. So there's a transform stabilize, transform match move, transform stabilize baked, and transform match move baked. Okay. So if I'm passing this footage off to somebody, so at ILM, what they would do is that somebody's job is to track footage, and then they give it to somebody else to put all the stuff together. So they don't need it connected to this because when they send it off, it's like locked in. There's no changing it. So they would do this baked one, and when I hit create for the baked one, there it is. This is just a standalone animated match move. It's like I set keyframes on it. And they would basically just hand them this node, and that node would be what they would use to drop in all their footage. Okay? In this case, because of what we're doing, we want to make sure we're on just transform match move and create. So there's number 2s. I'll go to number 3, and then I'll go to number 4. And then just to keep them, so I know which one goes to which, I'll keep them right under here until I'm ready to use it. Okay? So I want to now add in another piece of footage. So I'm going to drag this over here. And unfortunately, there's no like dot node for this. You can't drag that out. Just ignore it. And then I'm going to merge this into my main line. And then I'm going to do the same setup that I have here. Okay, so I have an image. I'm going to cut it out somehow, and I'm going to pre-multiply it, transform it, and then put it into the mix. I need myself a little bit more room, so just bring that down. Go. So let's read in that max res monkey. Perfect. He will be transformed here. We'll add a transform node. Whoa. We'll scale him down. And this is number 2. Where's number 2 at? Oh, right there, okay. So go to this transform. We'll scale that down. Drop it on his head, on his back, monkey on his back. All right, and then we need to cut him out. So I'm going to go to this, and I need to cut this out. Now, this is a piece of footage that was probably already cut out, and they put it on a green background for YouTube so that it's easier for you to cut out, or on wherever they put it. So I'm going to go to that picture, and I'm going to add a keyer, and this is going to be a green screen keyer just like we did before. I'm going to hit A over here so I can see it, and I'm just going to drag this up, and it should be, there we go, yeah, pretty quick as to when it does that. Now you'll also see that there's a shadow down here too. I'm just going to get rid of that shadow. There we go. Oops. All right, so now I pre-multiply this. There's the monkey cut out. He's transformed. He's match moved. He's on his back. Now there is a difference too. It's subtle, but because I tracked his hat, or his hoodie, the monkey's actually following the hoodie, not his back. So if he were to shake his head like this, the monkey would move like that because that's what he's tracked to. And then let's just put him on top of here. So you can see how he's kind of moving there, and the monkey's like moving with him. Devilish. All right, so you get the idea with that one. We could do that for number 3 and 4 also. So now let's see what else we can do with this. Let me see, where do I want to put this? Mm-hmm.
How come it seems like the monkey gets smaller as you get closer?
He gets smaller when we get closer, but he's actually staying the same size. Okay, so as I get here, he shouldn't be scaling down. Maybe he is. Oops, not that one. No, yeah, it's just perspective. It's just how it's looking like that. Now let's say that we did want him to scale, so we'll do that. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to add a tracker right there. Drop this in here. So this is a brand new tracker, and I'm just going to view this and ignore all the other stuff. So let's say that I wanted to have something that would actually move and scale and everything. So this screen right here is pretty defined. So I want to put something on top of that screen. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of the footage. I'm going to add a track right here. And I'm going to add another track right here. There we go. And I'm going to grab both of these and then just say track forward. Now, if you're not comfortable tracking both at the same time, then don't. But I'm going to let it go. I'm going to see what happens. And then if it didn't turn out, then I'll track one at a time and just watch that thing. Eventually, it may just fall off the frame and then not work, because I believe it should have canceled already, but it didn't. Yep, see, look at that. Attached to Jeff's back. All right, so right there, track number 1, let's enable or disable track number 2. Okay, so what we're tracking is that corner of the monitor, but you'll see that at some point it jumped the corner and is now on Jeff's back. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to track number 1, and I'm just going to make that a bit bigger and maybe scoot it over some more, and then say track forward again. Oops, and see, it jumped on your back again. It likes you, it really does. All right, now this button here is track forward 1 frame. So I can basically do this like frame by frame. That way it doesn't add too many things that are unneeded. It did it again. We're so close. All right. For this demo, let's just not track that. Let's track something else. I'm going to track something more obvious. I will track these two lights back here. Those will be much more obvious, and they're in frame the entire time. So there's one light. There's the other light. And sure, we'll even track this switch. All right, so all three are enabled. If I grab all three, I shouldn't have to do that, but just be safe. And then track forward. So there's a lot of contrast there, which is what makes that work. Before, when it was jumping off, the color values from that monitor to Jeff's jacket were so close that it was just like bouncing back and forth, trying to decide what to get. So here, those lights are pretty contrasty with the background. It should work pretty good. It looks like the switch jumped off. So let's see when the switch jumped off. It's right there. It just stopped. It's just like, nope. Okay, so I'm going to turn off 2 and 1 because those two look like they're good. I'm going to go to track number 3. Going to just adjust it. I'll go frame by frame for a couple. There it goes. And then hit play again, or track again. So right now, the other tracks that we did were just transform tracks. Basically, where are those pixels from frame to frame to frame? That's all it's doing. We may want other things to happen. So let's see what we can do. Where's my monkey again? I'm just going to keep using him because it's already set up. Copy the monkey. I'm going to just paste him down here. Okay. So I'm going to go to tracker 5. I'm going to export this out as a match move and say create. Drop this here. Merge this in. And then preview it. How creepy is that, right? We'll add a transform, we'll scale him down, and we'll put him in his position way back here, right? So he should be way in the back. Let me just delete or disable the other two. Obviously this needs to be further up in the chain because of it's behind stuff, but just ignore that for now. All right, so he's going to be way back here, about, let's say there. Okay, so he's like on the wall, so close enough. So now we rewind and we hit play. And what we're going to see is that he's definitely moving in sync with number 1. Whichever track was number 1, that's the one he's moving with. So this item here, that was number 1, that's what he's moving with. Okay. Now, what about all the other track stuff that we did? Let's go back to tracker 5. Tracker 1 is the only one sending out information. So that's what all of this is here, is like what information am I sending out? So right now it's giving out tracking information. So if I send tracking information for 1, 2, and 3, what that's going to do is it's going to take the average of all 3 of those tracks and put that as it. So any jittering that I might have should be kind of alleviated because it's tracking all 3 of them basically. So if I rewind this and hit play, there we go. I hit Q and that's my overlay. And now I hit play and then I can see. And he's going to look like he's pretty close to being locked into all of those. Come on. We're going for round 2. Hold on. I'm going to save my file. There we go. Okay. Now he still looks like he's scaling down, but it's just the wall. Because the wall, we're getting closer to it, the wall is getting bigger, he looks like he's scaling down. Now what I want to do too is if I have these points here, Nuke should be able to kind of figure out how close we're getting to objects and stuff. So I'm going to turn rotate on. And what we're seeing now is that he's actually rotating a little bit. And I'm also going to turn scale on. So now we don't have that problem because way back here and there, it actually gets, it looks like he's getting a little bit bigger. Let's see. Let's go to our transform. Here is his scale. So he starts off with a scale of 1. And then by the end of this, he has a scale of 1.6, which is appropriate because as we get closer to that background, he should be getting bigger. Now, if we realized, hey, this is like too big, Nuke, you kind of screwed up a little bit, I still have this transform, so I can always go into this other transform here. It's thinking. There we go. Oops. So there's the bottom of him. So I can take this other transform and I can scale the other transform in.
Right in the middle of my lecture, the projector.
Dead?
Yeah, just started back up again.
So I can go here and set a key on this, set a key on this, go to the very beginning, and maybe scale him up just a hair right there. Okay, and Nuke is auto key, so we don't have to worry about it. So now that looks like it's more locked into what that is. Okay, so on top of what Nuke's track, we can always come back and touch up some of those things too. And you'll also see if I go to that match move, here's the rotation. You can see it's at a negative whatever number. It should be at 0 at the beginning. Right there. There we go. And then as it's rotating, or as it's moving, you can see that there are some subtle rotations there. So if I had a character who turns their head, the tracking one is only going to track the eye movement. But if I want that item to also turn, I need to track both eyes so that the item will also turn. Okay? So this is our introductory, like, playing around stuff. So don't worry too much at this point about doing any kind of shadows or reflections or anything. Just get into this one and just start playing with it. Track a few items, like 3 or 4 items. Explore the options of like transform, rotate, and scale, so that you can see what those would do. And then obviously, depending on where you put stuff, it depends on the order. So the monkey should be behind him. So this should be way over there. So I can either move this there, or I can move that down low. So I'm going to take this to there, take that, oops, to there, and then I will take this stuff to there. Oh, right there. And there we go. So now the monkey is behind him. Okay, and again, you can see that how I'm flowing with this, where I have, this is all my tracking footage here, and then this is just flowing like straight down the list. Okay, and I could remove that jitter again if I were to track something else in a relative plane. So if I tracked, let's say, this exit sign, it wouldn't do anything because it's moving different than he is. If I track this, it's moving different. So I want to make sure that whatever I'm tracking, and I'm trying to like remove jitter or whatever, that is an appropriate spot to be tracking. Sketchy. Come on. I don't know what that's doing. All right, so once you're done with your still composite, grab the footage, cut out a piece, bring in the Nuke, and just start tracking and then adding some tracked items in there. It's going to feel a little bit clunky at first, obviously a bit difficult, But it actually gets pretty fun when you get to the end of this, because then you can start doing like effects too. Like besides just a monkey on there, you can track someone's head and do like a distortion on them, so like their head looks like it's exploding or something. So like, yeah, we'll play with that later. That's good enough.